BYU falls to Texas Tech 34-7 in the Big 12 championship game. Mitch Harper, Kyle Ireland here with KSLSports.com. Kyle, it felt like deja vu all over again. BYU gets hammered against the Red Raiders. Kalani Sitake says Texas Tech, the best team in the country. Your initial thoughts on this loss in Arlington in the title game?
Yeah, I would say that it started off with some false hope because BYU goes up 7-0, ends up Texas Tech was able to move the ball throughout the day. They started off being able to move the ball, but BYU gets off the field early, marches down with a long drive of 90 yards on their opening possession and put it in the end zone. It leaned on LJ Martin, who wasn't healthy the first time these two teams played. And you're like, oh, maybe this is different, And then quickly, Texas Tech just continued to kind of just mull things along, and they were able to move the ball effectively. Cameron Dickey was able to run the ball. Out of their first 25 plays, he had half of them as touches out of the backfield or running the football. And so they had a game plan that BYU couldn't stop defensively to a degree that they needed to. And then ultimately, like you said, it was a deja vu situation, a mirror image where the offense and special teams, the turnovers, the mistakes just added up, and Texas Tech's a dang good football team. BYU's still a good football team, but they're just not at the same level.
No question. BYU's a really good football team. They finished the season 11-2. They'll await their next game on Selection Sunday. I don't expect the playoffs. I expected the playoffs in the regular season at 11-1, and for that standpoint, I would still expect it. But after this performance, when you're already outside and then you lose by 27, safe to say you're probably not going to move out. So unless some craziness happens around the sport of college football. But BYU did themselves no favors. 90 yards on the first opening drive and then 110 yards the rest of the way. Bear Bachmeier was dealing with a lower leg injury. And look, that wasn't the sole issue for BYU. Texas Tech's got an outstanding defense. But I do think that Bear's injury, that first drive, it was the play right before they scored a touchdown. He takes a big hit from Roberts, and he was visibly limping after that play. And you could just tell that using the back foot was a little bit challenging. And I just thought that BYU's lack of any sort of big plays through the air, it was just dink and dunk, and some of them popped off some decent gains. Parker Kingston had a 20-yard gain. But that's just not going to work. The methodical drive bit is not going to work consistently against Texas Tech. It worked for that first drive. It's not going to work the whole game. So they needed big chunk yardage through the air. They couldn't get it. I thought LJ Martin, despite the struggles that at times he had and how Texas Tech was just basically daring BYU to throw the football, I thought LJ still looked pretty good. He looked like the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year. He ended up with 76 yards in the game, but it was a tough 76. But I thought he looked healthy, much healthier than he did in Lubbock. But it was just a tough day all around. And I thought BYU's defense, too, you might like some of the production, how the fight, bend but don't break at times. Too many times, though, Texas Tech was in BYU territory. Even when they were still in the game early, Tech was always finding a way to get on BYU's side of the field. So the field position battle was never in BYU's favor. It was just an uphill battle the whole game.
Yeah, I think that the inability to throw the ball vertically was the biggest takeaway, because I thought that, we talked about so much about how they were in max protect the first meeting and how they needed to go away from that. Mm-hmm. But I think back to earlier this season, Mitch, you think about the 300-yard passing games that Bears had. You look at Iowa State, West Virginia. A lot of those yards were yards after catch. It was yes. Parker Kingston, Chase Roberts, a short intermediate kind of pass, but nothing that was like a deep shot down the field for 40 yards or something like that. It was those guys in open space creating those yards. I just thought that was something that was on display today. Late in the game, we saw one shot to Chase Roberts that resulted in a pass interference. And it's like, oh, okay, where was that all game? And then, LJ, he's good, but if you're relying just on LJ against what Kalani says is the best team in the country, even the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year is not going to be able to get it done by himself against a defense like that. The offensive line was a major disappointment today, Mitch. And the wide receivers, along with that, were disappointing in their the inability that they had to be able to block and set up some of those screens to be able to have those yak kind of plays. It was just offense didn't show up. The fake punt was I don't even know what that decision was. It ended up not hurting them because Tech ended up missing a field goal on their subsequent possession. But just it was an unclean football game from BYU's perspective. Kalani said it was more competitive, and maybe it was at times. I think it was a little bit. Yeah, at times. But BYU still, aside from the opening drive, unable to create momentum, unable to find rhythm. There was no consistency through any phase of this game.
And I think also, too, when we talk about Bear Bachmeier's performance, and he again goes, let's see, Bear finished with 16-27, 115 yards, took 2 sacks, had some interceptions. He had 2 interceptions. He had the fumble, too, where the offensive line, to your point, got blown up, and he's fake handoff to L.J. Martin, gets met by a defensive lineman, an interior guy, and then fumbles the football.
Yeah, spinning around.
There were moments, though, where the wide receivers did BYU no favors, and Bear Bachmeier. JoJo Phillips had a catch, and then he takes a hit from Wisniewski, the number 5, that defensive back. You got to catch that ball. I know it's a hard hit, and that was a bone-crushing hit. You got to catch the ball, though. That was a huge moment. There were also plays in this game where some 50-50 situations where Tanner Wall forces a fumble. The ball then bounces to Texas Tech's tight end, and he gets another, 19 yards, somewhere along those lines. Just, again, not saying Texas Tech's dominant, and I think they've got to get to the national title. I want to see Tech go all the way. They are for real. That is an outstanding defense, the best defense BYU has faced in the Kalani era. That spans a decade. They are outstanding. The speed, too. Like, you just blink half a second, and they have guys in the backfield. They just everywhere around Bear Bachmeier. So he's getting it off quick. So credit to him that he only ends up taking, 1 sack in the game? So, I mean, credit to him for not taking many sacks because he was getting it off quick, but there was just no threat to get downfield because he didn't have enough time, and he's got to get it off quick. There just wasn't many answers for BYU's offense, and I thought defensively, as the momentum continued to build for Texas Tech, you're starting field position almost every drive. You're in BYU territory. You're not going to win a game. You're not going to win that way. So one thing that was interesting, though, in the postgame press conference, Kalani Sitake said, lessons can be learned from these 2 games against Texas Tech. What's the biggest lesson to you that you learned that BYU maybe big picture going forward in the future that you can learn? And then also maybe what can be learned for what we learned from this season, just isolating these 2 games?
They have now gotten a 2-game sample size. It's not just a one-time performance on the road in Lubbock that you had that bad performance against a great team. You had it again today. You saw what that roster was made of, the NIL money that was put into it. I mean, we were there in Lubbock a month ago. The facilities are outstanding at Texas Tech. BYU needs to up their game, and obviously earlier this week when Kalani signed his extension with BYU, some commitments were made for facilities and so on and so forth.
And the players,
assistant coaches, support staff. All of those things need to be taken to a greater level, a higher level. And I know it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's not going to be a one-season fix kind of a thing. But this is big boy football. And if you want to win at the highest level, you have to be able to compete at all of those levels. So I would say that that's the biggest thing.
And I think just to follow up on that too, though, I think the biggest thing with that is it's from the lens of you want to get over the hump. Yeah. BYU could get back here without a $25 million roster.
Sure.
But if you want to get over the hump, you've got to have that. And look, the Big 12 gets viewed as second tier compared to the Big 10 and SEC. Go watch Texas Tech. Watch what's capable when you can invest. This is their first conference title in 70 years outright. Yep. First one in 70 years. They changed. I don't want to say it was overnight because it's been a slow build with Joey McGuire. This has been coming for some time, the way they've been building things. And that's why in the preseason I was so bullish on this Texas Tech team because you looked at the strategy of how they built their roster. It wasn't just getting a huge number of transfers. It was all conference guys from all walks of football, FCS, D2, a group of 5. I mean, they were very strategic, and they've come together as a great team. They got great chemistry. That's a fantastic football team. So BYU shouldn't hang their head low that maybe they lost twice this season to arguably the best team in college football, as Kalani Sitake said. But I think if you do want to win a Big 12 title, if you do want to just confidently go into Selection Sunday and know that you're in the playoff, that's what you got to do. You got to get to that 25 million threshold. And I say that number because Texas Tech, it was reported out there, 28 million over the summer is what they were doing to build their roster. We don't know the specific number, but it was a lot. It was a lot of money. You don't get David Bailey's and Romello Heights for cheap. So I just think that's one thing long term that can be done. And it's always a touchy thing at BYU because they want to do it the BYU way. But I don't think any Cougar fan would be opposed to, let's go do what the Texas Tech way is, because that looks pretty nice.
You can keep the culture that Kalani's built by adding those guys and just paying the best of those guys to come to BYU.
And two, guys want to play for Kalani.
Yep.
You know, and look, it's not just solely about the bag, and sometimes if you're paying the high dollar amounts, maybe you think, oh, guys are just coming for the bag, but guys want to play for Joey McGuire. I mean, I just have a lot of belief in Kalani. He will adjust. He's not just now sitting back and saying, I got the pay raise, I've made it, I'm the Polynesian Lavelle Edwards, I've arrived. No, they want to get back here, and they want to get it over the hump. And I'm really curious to see what kind of happens, Kyle, with this program, well, not the program, this year's team for the bowl game, assuming they don't go to the playoff, which I think pretty confidently, I don't expect that. I mean, we saw the graphic yesterday, 99.9% chance to go to the playoff if they win, 0.8 if they lose. So I'm not banking on that 0.8%. I'll be curious to see how they respond, because I don't feel like it's the same dynamics as last year where you could get hyped up to go face Coach Prime in a bowl game, a Heisman winner. This one feels a little deflating where you could go lay an egg in a bowl game if you're not completely dialed in. So maybe it could test the culture a little bit for this year's team to end it on a high note.
I think it depends on a couple of things. If they end up going to the Alamo Bowl again and it's like doing the same song and dance back-to-back years, like there's a little juice that gets taken out of that. If it's a Pop-Tart Bowl or something, you know, a different location, then maybe there's a little bit more excitement around that, different locale to go visit and, you know, spend the holiday season around. The one thing that I wanted to add about the post-game press conference was Kalani obviously was very complimentary of Texas Tech and Joey McGuire, their friendship and what they've built. But I never felt like any of the players or Kalani, they were disappointed in the result and the fact that they aren't good enough, frankly, to be the Big 12 champs at this point. But it was an understanding almost of where they are, the realization of where they are, and where they need to go in the future. And Chase Roberts was like, hey, BYU, he's done. Like, this is last year BYU, but he's like, BYU is going to be back in this game. They're going to be competing for Big 12 championships. I thought there was, like, despite the disappointment, there was an optimistic outlook from those players that they know what things need to be fixed. It's just going out and executing those things in the off season. I'm interested to see, you know, if there are any big changes, any schematic kind of things. Does the offense look a little different next year? Does the defense look a little different? I don't know. Coaches move jobs. Like, there's a lot of things that could happen between now and next September. And I think that Kalani's got to take a hard look in the mirror and say, hey, if we want to be like Joey McGuire and Texas Tech, we need to do X, Y, and Z.
And I think when Kalani says lessons can be learned, he's not just saying some coach speak answer. I think he really means it. Because, and it might not always be in front of everyone in the fans and the public view, but there will be internal changes that help try to level it up to get back here and get over the hump, because that's the goal. Because you know if you win the Big 12, you're going to be playing the playoff more times than not, unless you're the ACC and you got a 5-loss team contending for a championship game. More times than not, you're going to see in the Big 12 two excellent football teams duking it out for a title. And these two teams were outstanding this year. I just think Texas Tech is really, really good. Some other notes here from this game. You brought up the fake punt. Going back to that, I asked Kalani Sitake about that, and I bring that up because it felt like a moment in the game where BYU's still in it. It's the second quarter. I understand maybe the thought of Texas Tech's offense was always getting into BYU territory. If you give them the ball back, they're going to have a chance to get a 2-possession lead. But I just thought that was a spot where you needed a punt, because BYU's special teams, quite frankly, in November, in the last month of the season, they haven't lived up to their namesake and been special. I think it's been a lot of hit and miss. They have not been clean execution on that front. So I just thought that was a little bit too bold. BYU stayed true to its identity and going for it, which is aggressive. That's Kalani to a T, but ultimately I didn't think that was the right move to do that.
Yeah, going for it on your own side of the field, I just wasn't comfortable with the timing of it. maybe later in the game that makes more sense. It also seemed like Texas Tech just knew they were going to do it at that moment. They sniffed out that play. Kalani said that there was one player on their team that read it the whole way.
We talked about it in the press box. There was like a 10. I'd have to go back and actually see when BYU does fake punts, but it felt like their huddle was a little extra long. Like a second or two longer than usual when they broke the huddle. And it just felt like they're making sure dotting T's, crossing dotting I's, crossing T's. Are we all on the same page? All right, break. Like, it just felt a little bit like that. And like we talked about in the press box, I'm like, this feels like a fake. And it sure enough was. Like, we're calling that in the press box. And sure enough, Texas Tech, who was absolutely dialed in, nothing threw them off other than the first drive where BYU had them on their heels. But after that, it was all Wreckham and Texas Tech.
Also, Will Farron has missed field goals in 6 games this season, Mitch. What happened to Will Farron from his season a year ago? Because coming into the year, you were like, hey, he's going to go for the Groza Award.
I said he'd win the Groza.
And he just hasn't had the season that Cougar fans, we thought he would have. Started off the season strong, had a little bit of a dip there, kind of came out of it a little bit, other than the Texas Tech game when he missed a field goal. But misses 2 last week, misses 1 today. It's just like, you've got to, especially in these moments, you've got to have a guy you can rely on. You've got to have a guy who's like, hey, when we put you out there, you're getting us 3.
Well, and outside of that first drive of the game, that was the first drive of the third quarter, 47 yards gained. That was the only other drive outside of the first drive where you had a pulse. You were moving the ball a little bit. And then to end up empty-handed, you just go,
yep.
That's how the day goes, gentlemen.
That's how
like
the cookie crumbles.
That's how. Yes, you're gonna have to get out of the seats and get off those sidelines. That was kind of a funny tidbit, seeing the crumble branding in the end zone. Every media member in the press box, national and local, just understood the assignment. It's like, yep, there's Crumble showing up at the Big 12 title. Even in the halftime, John Pardee, the halftime country singer, there was signage on the Jumbotron that said Crumble while it was showing him. So Crumble's everywhere, man. What was it? Provo Dave said, that's how we kept Kalani, boys. $5.50 for a cookie. Look, BYU football, I think Cougar fans watching this and listening to this, you hold your head up high because BYU football is in a great place. You just got to tip your cap to Wreckham and Joey McGuire and how dang good they are at wrecking their opponents. And I think, though, the future of BYU football is in great hands. I think Bear Bachmeier will respond from this. I mean, but there's still true freshman moments from him. And, you know, there was times where he floats a pass to Carson Ryan to leave him to take a massive hit. Carson got blown up. And those are the moments where you don't float that thing to your receiver to let him take a massive hit. He can learn from that. And he will learn from that because he's going to be the face of BYU football next year. Point blank. If LJ doesn't come back, it's Bear's show. It's his program next year. And he'll take BYU as far as they're going to go in 2026. So this can be one of those moments where it's the cliche meme where, hey, I'm looking at the confetti, Stephon Diggs style, looking at the confetti, using this as motivation to get back. I don't think that happened. We didn't really get a chance to come out on the field. We went to the post-game press conference, but use it as fuel to respond because, as Brett Yormark says, this stadium, it's aspirational. It's aspirational here at the AT&T Stadium. I love the press box. I love the stadium. It's fantastic, great setup. I wish we could experience this every home game, but there's got to be a lot of motivation to get back here and then get it done the next time you get there.
Yeah, and I think that they have the tools. They just need to go out and utilize them. And, you know, Bear's going to be a better quarterback next year than he was this year. And he's going to work on his mechanics. He's going to probably, you know, work with a quarterback coach this summer. And he's going to have, I don't know if we're going to hear John Beck stories next year about Bear Bachmeier this summer. But it's just going to be like one of those things where it's a progression from a freshman to a sophomore to a junior. And with Bear, he has a lot going for him. And I think that, you know, at the beginning of fall camp, if you would have said BYU is going to start a true freshman and they're going to go 11-2 and be in the conference championship game, most of the fan base would have taken that. And so that's all you can ask for with this situation. I think BYU lived up to its potential in that way, especially with the fact that they were facing the Red Raiders both of the times they lost this season. They passed every other test. So it's just being able to take that next step, like you said, because last year didn't make the conference championship game. This year made the conference championship game. Next time up, it's to win that game and to be in the playoff. So it's a progression. Kalani's been able to do that throughout his 10 years. He's continued to build this program up to the point of where it's at today. It's just, again, taking that next step.
We're going to wrap it up here from Arlington. I will say this, Kyle. This loss is tough. It's tough for BYU because you just never can assume you're back. You can't assume. Texas Tech didn't get here for their first 30 years in the Big 12. This is their first appearance. You would have thought how they were acting or how they looked on the field, like this is an annual occurrence for that program. This is their first time, so you can never assume you're just going to get back instantly. But the thing is that the loss today would have far inferior or less impactful than possibly losing Kalani. And I think you get Kalani retained. He's locked in for the long term. He'll get this right. Kalani's going to get this adjusted and get BYU to bounce back and be better long term. And again, it sits in my mind, but I think that comment about lessons learned, I believe that with Kalani Sitake going forward with this program. We're going to sign off here from Arlington, Texas. The Cougars fall to Texas Tech 34-7. Tomorrow we'll learn BYU's postseason fate. Will it be the playoff? Doubt it. Will it be the Alamo Bowl against USC? Could it be the Pop-Tarts Bowl? We will see tomorrow. So for Kyle Ireland, Mitch Harper, check out all of our coverage on KSLSports.com.